Good evening, everybody. My name is Tim Reeves, and we are starting our first of two community forums for our bond.
Can't hear you.
Thank you so much for spending your time with us tonight. And we have a few friends that are here to help out along the way, and we hope that others join. And I think Kalina is going to help us by maybe muting some of the background noise here a little bit. And we do have some slides, but a couple things to just take care of at the very beginning. So first of all, as I said, thank you for attending. The second is we truly would have liked to do this in person. And that truly was our goal, but under the current order, we're doing this virtually tonight. We have another one scheduled for April 21 at 6 p.m. And our goal is to have that one be in person. So April is a whole world away when it comes to executive orders from the state. So we'll see what that brings. But the last thing before we officially get started, with the actual presentation, I just wanted to say that this is as much of a conversation as it is a presentation. While you will hear mostly from me tonight, while I'll be talking mostly about the slides and some of the pieces and parts of the bond and the bond campaign, I certainly want you to feel like you can ask some questions, and either you can put that in the chat if you know how to use chat in the Zoom world, or you can raise your hand, which is another option in the Zoom world, or you can old school just raise your hand and one of us will try to notice and allow you to ask that question. Because if we were in a auditorium or in a cafeteria area, I would certainly want to respond to that while we're going through. So with that, we'll get started, and Kalina or Emma will pull up some slides for us, and we'll start from there. Just an introductory slide that today, it's March 16, and this is our first slide. So we're ready for the next one. Here's the agenda. It's really about the overview of the bond. And secondly, about what we're after with the bond specific, and we'll get into site-specific pieces. We'll talk a little bit about the economic impact of that bond and our school district. We want to definitely touch on the impact for taxpayers, and certainly at the very end of the conversation, we want to have an FAQ. And we certainly want that to be an opportunity for people that have listened to the process, ask those essential questions, and we'll get you those answers. But of course, again, as we move through, that would be great too. So the first thing, why are we here and why are we asking taxpayers for this bond at this time, and what goals are we trying to achieve? And the first and foremost is we do have an aging infrastructure in Shelby. Our newest building, or the building that I've heard in my 4 school years being in this district, the brand new building is the high school, and that is 24 years old. And while it is a building that's in great shape, it needs some improvements and some upkeep to it as well. And then just district-wide safety needs that we want to make upgrades to those buildings to move into the 21st century as far as people flow and safety in those buildings. We want to invest in education. That's a very important thing for us, and we know that we need to do that, and we know that we need to do that by pulling those 2 buildings, the K3 Thomas Reed and the 405 New Era, and bringing those over to the main campus, to a centralized campus, and make that investment into our elementary education. And then the last piece is that financial responsibility of just some cost savings that we can do, some upgrades and some improvements. We've made some of those in the last year to 18 months with some basics as far as electrical, HVAC, water. But we need to make that step, that next step, and that is to talk about how we can do a greater save to the overall district. Next slide, Emma. And this is just kind of how did we get to where we are, and really this goes back just over a year ago to middle of March of last year, where Team Chrisman joined us, and we started to do a facility development. We started to look at what past bonds had looked at or analyzed in Team Chrisman, which I say, when I say Team Chrisman, that's Chrisman Construction, a company that we have worked with since last March to help facilitate the bond, to help study what we need. So they came through and did a full facility review for us, a building study for us. And then we started to also meet with stakeholders at that time. Really, that was around in the spring and summer, where we reached out to a variety of stakeholders in our community and just asked them to provide input into us as to what they thought our district needed to pay attention to. That led into sending out community forums, sending out surveys, and further diving into our specific needs and hearing from parents at that point in time. So we had a good response rate from parents when we sent those forums out, asking those essential questions that we gained through the building study, through listening to stakeholders, and through the facility assessment. And then after we reviewed the surveys and looked at overall the information, now we got down into prioritizing what we needed to go after, what was realistic, what was feasible. A phrase I've used all along when talking about the bond: we want to make sure that what we're asking for is not a Cadillac, but a Chevy. And truly that we prioritize those important needs to ask for just what we're after. And that's where we came to the facility plan. All right.
Hey, Tim, before you jump on, there is a question in the chat about, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on the stakeholders that were involved in the process.
Sure. I'm trying to remember, it was somewhere between 15 to 20 people that joined us. Some were business leaders, some were community leaders, various leaders in the area that ran organizations, led businesses, any kind of organization in our area that has great impact. And we invited some of those people in to engage in that process. There were some consistent core people that showed up every time, and then there were some that could make it as it was. Does that answer that question? I hope so, and if not, we can elaborate on that further. Okay.
Thanks, Tim.
So when we did that facility plan, or after we finished that facility plan, we had a total bond ask for $33 million, a $33 million investment. And what that translates to is a 2.3 mil increase to our current school tax levy. And you can see that in a very generic way, we've put down market value of a home, taxable value of a home, what that would translate into for a homeowner cost-wise per year, per month, per week. And we did it in those chunks of 50, 100 to 150,000. On our website, you can go to, on our Shelby Schools website, you can go to an actual tax calculator. We have a feature, a drop-down feature on that website where you can go in and you can input your information individually about your specifics, and they can, and that will generate an exact amount of what that would cost, what that increase would cost. We'll get back to this one later, but just again, as the facility study came out and what investment it was going to take to improve our district, it came out to be that $33 million investment. Ready for the next slide, Emma? Thank you. So let's get to the specifics, and some of those specifics involve the various areas, and we're gonna start with a high school. And the high school involves a $5.2 million estimate as a ballpark. And you can see on the bullet points, the bullet points listed here are going after, you know, the safe and secure entrance of that building, some basic movements of how we safely move people in and out of the buildings, something that we must pay attention to these days. Some auditorium upgrades. I always say we have a beautiful, gorgeous auditorium in our district, that it truly is a feature, a beauty point of our district. That being said, after 24 years of good use in that auditorium, we need to do some upgrades in lighting, sound, and seating. Just some TLC that fine arts center needs. Selective furniture upgrades to classroom and office, media area. Roofing is an important piece. That building needs a large portion of that $5.2 million needs to go to some roofing repair on that structure. Which is always the case when you have big buildings with flat roofs. There's always some maintenance that needs to go into them, and that building needs some flooring replacements, a little bit of a facade improvement that goes along with that, the exoskeleton of the building as we look for that safety improvement. And then we have the replacement of some of the AV, parking lot, and track. So those are the big basics of what we would tackle with the high school. Let's look at that visual of what we're talking about. We kind of have starred what we're talking about in those various areas, those big bullet points of the flooring in the auditorium, in the parking lot, some of those exteriors, and we've tried to talk about where they might need to be. I think we're ready for that next slide, Emma. And this might be what some of those safe and secure entrances might look like in our high school and or any of the other buildings. I've been in other districts where those have been installed and upgraded, and they do look very similar to this. So this is kind of a rendering, more than a rendering. These are exact photos of what those vestibules might look like. Before we leave the high school and move to the middle school, are there any specific questions about the high school that have popped up? You can just unmute yourself and ask, or put it in the chat, or raise your hand, and we'll make sure we get to you.
Hey, Tim, there was a question in the chat about whether or not these slides are available on the website, and I don't believe that they are, but those are slides that we can make available, and we're actually recording this, and this presentation will be available as well after the fact.
Absolutely. We have sent these slides out, photos of these slides out on the newsletter that should have gone to every Shelby community member. We do have, so just to stack on top of what Jeff's saying, we do have these up in the entrances of our athletic entrance at the high school, and each building has a specific, their specific foam board of what those improvements might look like. But yes, certainly we can make sure that we add them to our website if they are not already there. Anything else from the high school? I think we have one. How are the updates different from the already budgeted preventative maintenance funds? Yeah, that's a great question, and we can certainly touch on that as we move through the whole process. And the reality is in a school district world, there's not a lot of capital outlay for maintenance for $1 million roof constructions. And when I say $1 million roof redos, I think I'm a little bit under that amount on what it will cost to fix and repair the roof at the high school. So I believe it's slightly over $1 million to do the repair work on that high school. And to set aside that amount of money over the course of the lifetime of the roof means that you're taking that away from the teaching, learning, and instruction of the students in that regular classroom for those students at that point in time. And that's just not a practice that Shelby has done for a very long time, if ever. But that is certainly something that maybe down the road, once this bond passes, we certainly can take a look at that. But that is not a practice where we set aside $1 million in a reserve fund or more than $1 million to take care of roofing replacements. Ready for the middle school. So at the middle school.
Can I ask a question?
I'm sorry?
Excuse me? Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
I'm just curious why we would want to finance over 30 years some of those items that depreciate in 3 to 5 years, such as, I can't remember some of the things that were listed, but AV equipment and things like that. That means in 30 years, when that equipment may have been replaced 2, 3, or 4 times already, we're still paying for it. Wouldn't it be better to maybe set some money aside for 6 months and then pay cash for that rather than finance it all along?
Absolutely. And that's I'm glad you asked that question, because this bond is not asking for us to purchase anything that has such a quick, fast depreciation such as that. In fact, there's specific language in there about us not using it to depreciate on those items that depreciate quickly as that. Let me give you an example. Chromebooks, something that is kind of like a laptop. It's a device that allows students to connect to the internet. Many of our all of our high schoolers take those homes on a frequent and regular basis. We have many of those audio, visual, technological type devices in our district that we use and consume. They have about a 5 to 6 year life expectancy. And those are none of the items that we're talking about purchasing with this bond money. In fact, what we are talking about purchasing is only the audiovisual parts that go into the physical structure of the building itself. And that's just simply something that we would list in that bond. So I hope I answered your question. We're not talking about purchasing any short run, highly depreciable items.
Tim, there's one more question in the chat about whether or not the bond can include dollars set aside for preventative and predictive maintenance, so that we're not faced with an additional bond in 20 years. And there is an important distinction in terms of how bond dollars can and cannot be spent. So we cannot spend bond dollars on maintenance or repairs, things like that. I think that is an important distinction, and there is a frequently asked question that sort of addresses what bond funds can and cannot be spent on. They can't be spent on salaries. There's certain other things that they cannot be spent on as well. So unfortunately, the maintenance side of it really, it's a more difficult thing to answer relative to the bonds, where this at least puts the district in a position where they can plan long term for when those replacements are going to be necessary.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. And please, again, any other questions along the way would be great. So we're at the middle school, very similar to the high school in that we're talking about entrance renovation, safe and secure entrance to that area. some media center renovations, some new classroom flooring, new media center furniture. Again, some replacement of the AV in the building for the building, hardwired into that building, roof replacements, facade upgrades. So we're talking right along Shelby Street. Locker replacements. Those lockers have certainly outlived their life expectancy and have been repaired a certain number of times. Food service. So the food service department at our middle school is our main kitchen. That is the kitchen that does the most cooking, and we do most of our cooking. I almost can say 100%, but I probably shouldn't. But most of our cooking is from scratch, as opposed to heat and serve. And that kitchen in the middle school is our central kitchen. And as we have taken on the feeding of more of our students and providing higher quality from scratch meals for students, we have to do a few upgrades and some reconfiguration into that building, and then some overall parking lot improvements as well. You're going to hear that theme on parking lot improvements throughout this presentation, because just as an overall, our asphalt in our district needs some attention. Again, kind of a rendering of what we're talking about, the facility that we're talking about, and where we're talking about. Again, just highlighting those visual areas. And then I think we are ready for another photo of maybe what some of that media center upgrade furniture might look like, maybe how that might look. And also we would be doing, similar to the last set of photos that you saw with the high school, also a safe and secure entrance as well. So before we move on to the next building, any questions specifically to the middle school?
Not hi, this is Sharon Halleck. Not specifically to the middle school so much, but your media center pictures made me think of media technologies and using local contractors. And I wonder if you could just speak to that as far as using, I know that it all has to be bid out and it's a competition and all that, but maybe just want to share a little of that.
Thank you, Sharon. I appreciate that question. Absolutely, that would be something that we look at. We have a local business just around the corner that works, that manufactures media center, library, like furniture. So that would certainly be something that we would take a look at. In fact, we do have a slide in this presentation about the economic impact in our local area and how we would look to achieve that. So thank you. Yes, that is certainly something that would be considered for sure. Any other questions? All right, I think, Emma, we are ready for the next slide. So the new K-5 building, I should have also mentioned this at the last slide. You don't have to go back, Emma, but the amount of money that we were talking about for the middle school was $5.9 million for those improvements. So I said 5.1 for the high school, 5.9 for the middle school. And here's where we see out of that 33 million, the largest amount of that money going, and that is for that construction of that new K-5 building. So the school district owns some property right on the north side of the Horseshoe Drive that connects our current middle school and our current high school. And that would be a perfect place for us to safely set off of the busier road, that newer K-5 building. And really, you can see here we have 4 bullet points that talk about what that new K-5 building would look like. It's easy to describe. It's just going to be a brand new building. And again, I want to emphasize the phrase, when I say a brand new building, we're not talking about a Cadillac, we're talking about a Chevy. I've seen in my 23 years, I've seen buildings that were built with lots of bells and whistles, and I've seen buildings that were built just as a basic school, and that would be what we would look to do. What does that do for us? Well, and this is that second set of bullet points. The new campus, or that new one campus plan, allows us those operational savings through a single location. We have those mechanical efficiencies, operational efficiencies, no more transportation of food, the convenient logistics for parent pickup and drop off. What I always like to say is the olders would be able to go pick up the youngers, or the biggers would be able to go get the littles. They could literally walk across the drive to go help pick up their younger siblings. Decrease transportation costs as far as the bottleneck that having New Era, our 4-5 building, 6 miles away, one way, how that is a bottleneck to the instructional process. And while we have to collect all students in one location and then send New Era students out to New Era, then bring New Era students back in, and then send all students back out, it eliminates that process that I just explained. And it just really fits into that economies of scale when you have when you have that one campus. It also allows us nice opportunities to reuse the facilities of Thomas Reed and New Era. And I'll talk about those here in a minute, but I certainly wanted to focus on the K-5 building piece first. So I think if we can go to that rendering. I had a conversation with a gentleman who dropped by my office last week, Friday. So this is what the building would look like. No, that's not what the building would look like, where it would have a big part that said specials or K1 through 2 classrooms. This is an idea. This is a conceptual rendering of how the building would be laid out. And we've looked at a couple different, the design process of what that building actually would look like takes place as soon as the bond passes. But that is the area that building would sit. That is the general footprint that building would take up on that land over there. We certainly would have 2 split age appropriate grades for the K2 versus the 3-5. We have some gorgeous property that we could turn into an outdoor learning space, play field area. We certainly have the land to take advantage of taking or creating a nice clean parent drop off, and then a totally separate bus drop off. Something that at Thomas Reed, just as the town has grown around that landlocked district, there's always been traffic congestion with Thomas Reed. We have it down better, I think, than we have in the past. But still, it's a landlocked area that with lots of parent drop off, we could alleviate that problem right away. And I think we're ready for the next slide. So this is just, again, an idea of what more contemporary, new, modern elementary might look with flexible learning spaces. So in most newer schools today, tables, chairs, everything has wheels or is easy to slide and move because there's so much group learning that takes place with different support structures, and that has just gotten away from the old-fashioned 25 different desks in a row, and that is certainly what we would look to go to with that flexible learning environment in those K-5 classrooms. Any questions on the K-5 building before we move to the Thomas Reed? Okay, I think we're ready to go to the next slide. All right, so this is the Thomas Reed, this would be the Thomas Reed building. and we would look to repurpose parts of Thomas Reed and then keep parts of Thomas Reed just the way it is. And the part about keep Thomas Reed just the way it is, we would transition it from an early childhood and K-3 building to just an early childhood building. And that early childhood wing over there, that newer part that was built around 2000, 2001 is in great shape. The only thing that we would need to do to it is modernize that safe and secure entrance like we would do for all of the other buildings. That current building has its main office right in the middle, and we would need to move it to one of the outskirts to create that flow of people. We would demolish the oldest wing of the building to improve that site and create the additional green space. The gym is a great gym. We would want to keep that, do a little bit of classroom furniture upgrades, maybe do something with the bus loop there. But basically, the big focus with Thomas Reed is two things. We have the opportunity, we have a after-school program that's commonly referred to as Aspire. We've had it for quite a while. We just renewed that grant for another 5 years, and I don't see that grant running out. And that after-school program that we call Aspire is a program that services quite a few of our students, and it would benefit from being in a central location. Right now, we allow that program to live in all of our buildings and live in different classrooms in our buildings. So this would be an opportunity to take that program and give it its own home. The other option is a partnership, a partnership with a local community college, whether that be West Shore Community College or Muskegon Community College, where we can create a satellite learning facility for any student beyond, any learner beyond high school. So if you envision our high school grads or a young adult seeking to further their education through community college, they would not necessarily need to get in the car and drive up to Custer or down to Muskegon. They could simply, or they could simply drive over to Thomas Reed and take some satellite classes through what's called a distance learning opportunity. All we would need to do is create an articulation agreement to make a program like that happen. And that would be something that we could use that facility for, or part of that facility for, in an after hours program. We've also talked about some sort of community, Oceana County Community Foundation, adult learning opportunities for people in Shelby or in Oceana County would be the plan for that. Any questions on the Thomas Reed piece? You see there another photo of the area that we would demolish that has the lines through it, the secured entrance that we would create for the ECC. The ECC is that lower left-hand corner piece. Just a few improvements on the gym and the parking lot, and that would be in good shape to go. So before we go to New Era, I want to make sure that we don't miss over anybody that has any questions about the Thomas Reed site. All right, Emma, I think we're ready for the New Era. The New Era site, we have a picture of New Era up, and the big points that we would do are off in the right side here. We want to make sure that we maintain that as an educational facility. I have heard in my time, in my 4 school years in the district, about Benona, and I have heard about Ferry. So the plan would be here to keep New Era as a school, just not as a core K through 12 building. As I've said before, it's a 4 or 5 building right now. And believe it or not, there are some people that think that it still is a K-5 building, and it's not. It hasn't been for some time. It is only a 4 or 5 building at this time. I like to say that it's a pretty little school on a pretty little hill in a pretty little village, and there would be no reason to take that offline or mothball it as a school. What we would want to do is turn it into a Southern Learning Center, an early childhood center. That is something that we have with our Oceana County Early Learning Center to the north. We have that to the center with our ECC, and this would be the one that we would have off to the south. It certainly, when we've done the research and when we've listened to people that have asked, we in many respects have to turn people away for those opportunities for those early learners in our district. 2020 has been an unusual year because of COVID, where we've had maybe less demand on that early learning and on some of those programming, because there's been more of a virtual learner to about the degree of 30% to 20%, 30% at the start of the school year, 20% as of February, where that amount of learners are virtual. And sometimes in those situations, young kids are just staying at home, and there's less of a need for a daycare or for an early learning program. But looking to the future, looking to a time where COVID would not become a center of attention or an everyday topic, that we would keep New Era as a learning facility with that early learner in mind, and possibly establish a private daycare, private public daycare program like we have up north with the Oceana County Early Learning Center. So all that we would do to that building is give those light renovations to the building. It certainly needs some parking lot improvements, some refreshed tech in the infrastructure of the building, and we would be good to go with New Era. Any questions on New Era before we leave that topic?
Tim, a couple questions in the chat, not necessarily specifically about New Era, but the first one is a question about whether or not local colleges have been talked to yet about using the Thomas Reed as a satellite site, or is that just kind of an initial idea? That's question number one. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, and I've got a few more after that.
Sure. So the first question, have they been formally talked to? No. The official answer to that is they have not. We have engaged in some low-level conversations. I'll tell you that there is conversation about them they are looking for, so I should say West Shore Community College is looking for a facility to find in Oceana County at the moment. And they have been looking around for a little while now. So that is certainly something that's somewhat in the works. So this could be an opportunity this could be a place for them to come. And certainly that could be an opportunity to start with Muskegon Community College.
The next question, Tim, in the chat, what are the 5 and 10-year demographics for enrollment? And then in parentheses, school of choice, unemployment status, and what is the academic curriculum rated at in the Shelby School District? And I'll take maybe the first portion of this. As part of this process, we submitted an application with the Michigan Department of Treasury. And as part of that package, the district did have to complete an enrollment study that looks at the next 5 years to make sure that it's understood sort of what the growth projections are, whether or not the population is increasing or decreasing. Based on that study, the school district is looking at about a 10% decline in population over the next 5 years. And so our charge as part of this process, as we look at creating learning environments for students in the next 5 years, is to make sure that we're responding to those growth trends. Tim, do you have any other data on some of those questions?
Yeah. I do. And I heard the last time I heard was 2-3 years ago, a state level statistician talk about enrollment trends of students in the state of Michigan. And basically, he talked about there has been a decline in students, K-12 students in the state of Michigan since 2008. And they had a prediction that that was supposed to level off somewhere around 2023, 2025 was their prediction. And that's probably about a 2-year-old, maybe 3-year-old presentation that I heard. So we, as in the ESD that we belong to, West Shore ESD, West Shore ESD has seen a decline in students in total, so overall. And there are 9 districts that I think West Shore ESD is made up of. Oceana County has seen a decline in students across the county over the last 13 years. So as a result, since the state has seen a decline, since our ESD has seen a decline, and since our county has seen a decline, we too have seen that decline. So there are a few areas in the state, I think of them mostly below the I-196, maybe below I-196 and above I-94, that a few targeted districts that see that total amount of students go up a little bit. And that's due to that overall greater impact of that local community. So that's the best answer I can give as far as the enrollment piece. And I think, Jeff, if you said it, I missed it, so I'll just add it on if you said it already. The K-5 building that we're proposing to build meets that future enrollment expectation. And we have to bring that in front of Treasury to have that approved. They need to see that we've done an enrollment study for them to approve it. Was that the question? Was there another question?
There was another question about, whether or not it would be beneficial to wait for certain construction costs to come down. The example being that OSB plywood, that's 4 times what it was before COVID, and that's just kind of an example of some materials that have gone up. I did post an answer in the chat to the fact that we definitely understand that certain things have spiked. And sometimes we see that those will level out, but we also balance that against the fact that, we really expect construction costs historically have grown, in the 3 to 4% a year, over the last several years. And so in general, we expect as we wait for those projects to cost more money. And also knowing that, and we'll get into some of the schedule conversation a little bit later, we're not going to start construction on these projects right away. So there's a little bit of time for, things to stabilize a little bit relative to some of these material costs, over the next year or so.
I'll share my one story. My first experience with a building build was in 1994. And it was a middle school that was built to house 600 to 700 students. It had 3 wings, 3 stories, and a gym that was high school regulation size, even though it was a middle school. And it wasn't a building it wasn't a Cadillac, it was a Chevy, okay? I've used that phrase, so I'll keep with it. It certainly was a Chevy, but that's a pretty big building, a 3-wing, 3-story high school regulation gym, 600 to 700. The price tag for that building in 1994 was just under $8 million. When we went back to build renovations at the high school, the building across the street, the high school, I remember the superintendent scratching his head saying, I thought that building was expensive back in 1994 for $8 million. I wish I could build that again. for, for the same price. But it's just, we know that costs of material seem to go up. So yes. Any other questions before we leave New Era? Okay, so this is the bond proposal timeline, and this is the timeline that we're looking at as far as once the bond passes on May 4, what would we do first and how would it go? And you can see that the first thing that we would be after is that new K-5 building. Remember, we have to do, or think about this, we would have to do a transition plan. So in order to make that one campus vision happen, we need to have that place for them to go. And you also can't do a whole lot of renovations, constructions, and repairs when students are in the building learning. So the first thing to do would be to get that new K-5 building online. And you can see the two different shaded purple parts, design versus build. And that's a process to go through. And then the second piece is the middle school, the high school, Thomas Reed, New Era, and the other pieces that you would do in a second phase to that. So there is an overlap part, but there's also a first part and there's also a second part. And that's just because there are two reasons. One, management of bodies, students, and movement, and you need to have a place for them to safely go and not have a disruptive environment. So that's why we would start the K-5 building first. Anything in there that I might be missing, Jeff? I think I got most of it, but I know that's more of a construction deal than it is a superintendent deal. I think I covered it. So any questions on the timeline before we leave that? All right. So one of the big things that we would want to achieve with this is capturing that localized economic development. And Sharon brought this question up about the media center furniture. So one of the things that we would want to do is work with and offer and come alongside local entities, local organizations, local businesses. I've enjoyed in my 4 school years the collaborative partnerships that we've engaged in with any of our local entities to help better our students. Because when we help better our students and we do it through the local entity, we all win. So that there would be that goal and that understanding that we would want to work with those local businesses to see how they might be able to come alongside our development, creation, design, and work on this project, through that outreach and through that connection with them. Again, just the overall economic impact when the tax dollars stay as local as they can, that helps to sustain the community, and that would be an important piece to us. We recently we're on the tail end of a energy project where I mentioned we were trying to do some HVAC upgrades and some lighting upgrades. In that project too, we tried to work with as many local entities as possible. In some instances, it just can't happen, but in others, and where it can, we want to try to do that. Any questions before we move off of that strong schools, strong communities piece?
There is one. I'm trying to go back and find it. So there was a question, Tim, about just acknowledging the fact that the schools aren't necessarily full right now. So why not wait until after the school can reassess the real needs of the area? And And I suspect that Nancy is related to just some uncertainty with COVID and you know what that looks like moving forward. So Tim, that was a question that we
Yeah,
wanted to try to
I,
get addressed as well.
I think we can get to that when we are looking at some of the bar and the bar graphs later on in the
Okay.
presentation. But the best way to answer that, so we started September 1st. We were the first county to open, to come back to school. It was September 1st. And we started with 70% of our students in person and 30% of our students in the virtual learning platform. Which, by the way, as a side note, we've received along as the year has rolled along a variety of communications, positive, of thank you for doing your best to stay open. And there were a couple times in October where it was a rough road with that, but we did as best as we could. So we started 70% in person, 30% virtual. Just last night, when we had a board meeting, I reported to the board that we are at 79% in person and 21% virtual. So we have gradually moved to more in person as the year has gone on and less virtual. And I don't envision that changing. I envision, as much as I can, a return to normal next year. I hope I'm not just being a wishful thinker. I think that we might see a few things residual, stay, but for overall, school getting back to what we remembered school to be a year ago. So I think this is just a bump in that respect. And we'll see that change back to the way it was. Any other questions before we move on? No, I think we're ready for that next slide. So this was the slide that we had popped up before. You saw it at the beginning, and now you're seeing it more towards the end of what I talked about in detail equates to that $33 million investment. We are asking for that 2.32 mil increase on that current levy. We're going to break that down in a minute. And again, I truly encourage you, head to our website. We have a nice informational bond portion of our website where you can just plug in your own unique information to find out, am I $2.23 a week? Or am I $2.50 a week? You can figure that out. So here's a great bar graph that shows back in 1997, when that bond for building the new high school was passed, we were at a 7.25 mill rate. And that was what was asked, and that was what was awarded for the school district. And those monies were used to build that high school. And you can see as time went on, that rate dropped, and that comes into a few, that translates into a few factors. Number one, interest rates drop and we could refinance the debt. Number two, property values stayed the same and or increased, and we could refinance the debt. And number three, regional employers in our area stayed healthy. So our overall financial picture continued to allow us to refinance that debt. I've been in 23 years, I've worked for 4 school districts. And I would have to say that out of all of the districts that I've worked for, Shelby is the most financially, fiscally responsible district that I've ever been in, where we are very responsible with the debt that we have in attempting to pay it off. Absolutely. So now we are into 2021. where this spring we will pay our last $13,100 payment on that high school, and that debt will go away. So what we are asking for is a renewal of that bond with an additional amount added to that, and that will bring us up to that 3.64. And that's what we are asking to do. So you can see that we're not asking to go back up to 7.25 where we once were. We're asking to go to half of that, because that's what it takes to get to that $33 million ask. So I think we're ready for that next slide. This tags into that piece that I was just talking about. And I like this slide, or I'm sorry, this graph, because it shows you where we are and where we want to go. But let's first talk about our neighbors around us. If you look at Pentwater and Baldwin, you can see that Pentwater and Baldwin are districts that have a little bit of a lower rate than us. They're at 1.2 and 1.24. Why are Pentwater and Baldwin in green? Because they're what are called out of formula districts. Back in 1995, they stayed with the property tax situation because they have Baldwin has Big Star Lake with a lot of expensive homes around that lake, and Pentwater has Pentwater Lake with a lot of expensive homes around it, and that feeds their school district because they elected to they are out of formula districts. Then the next closest district to us is Mason County Eastern at 1.25. That's if you think, for a couple of you that don't necessarily know where Mason County Eastern is, think Fountain and Free Soil area in Mason County. And then there's us. That's us at 1.32. And what I like to say is we are the educational bargain in our region. Out of all the school districts, we are educational bargain. Then to our right is Manistee at 2.25. Now, if you pause for a moment and look at Pentwater and Manistee, they actually have asterisks in those columns. And they have asterisks in those columns because this year they are going to their voters and asking to raise their mill rates as well. Though both those districts have facility improvement projects in the plan. I believe Manistee's is for May, and I believe Pentwater's is for November. So they are requesting to not stay at 1.2 and 2.25, but to go up. And then you can see Walkerville, Mason County Central, Ludington, Hart, Newaygo has gone up to 5, and then you get to Holton, Whitehall, Hesperia, Montague at 8.5, 8.6, and then White Cloud and Fremont all the way up to 9.5. I think Fremont went up to 9.5 when they built that very pretty new high school a few years ago. So what we're asking to do is we're asking to go from 1.3 over to the middle, just to the left of the middle, at that 3.64. Now you might ask, I thought you said 2.32 to get to that 33 million. Well, we do on top of the 1.32 that exists yet until it's paid off. And this is a big piece that I want to make sure that as the informational spokesperson of the district, we have the old debt of 1.32, and then we will have the ask for the new debt of 2.32, and that's how we get to the 3.64. And shortly after, somewhat in the not too distant future down the road, that would again go down to a much lower rate. So Shelby is asking for a very reasonable ask when it comes to our neighbors around us, whether that be our neighbors next door or our neighbors a few doors down the road. Any questions before we move off of these last two slides?
Tim, there was a specific question about the public's ability to use the track and, whether or not that, that's something that could be considered. I'm paraphrasing. So that was one question. And then I'll just address there was a question about what happens if interest rates were to go up. And I did answer that in the chat that, all of this is built on a pretty conservative financial pro forma. So there is the ability for, it's expected that, interest rates will go up over time. And that's sort of built into this, by the fact that it's a relatively conservative model. But any thoughts on the track, whether or not you want to address that tonight, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. That is certainly something that we can take a look at. To answer that question specifically, I would have to check into whatever guideline, policy, or procedure that we have that might allow us to do that. I would say simply send me an email to my Shelby email, and we could start that conversation going. But certainly that is an option. As long as it's not during a track meet, I don't see why it would be an issue. All right, let's, any other questions? This is a slide to just really talk to you about encouraging you to vote. Obviously, there's physically showing up at the polling location on Tuesday, May 4 from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then there is the option, the absentee voting, which first you would become, I believe you register to be an absentee voter, and then you actually receive that absentee ballot to go submit your vote. And then there's also the third option where you are able to go to the Secretary of State and become a registered voter. And I believe if you want to do that for this upcoming election, you would want to do that very, very soon. So any questions related to, I'm not a polling clerk, or I'm not a Secretary of Elections, so I can't probably get down into the weeds on any specific questions when it comes to what it takes to become a voter, but we can certainly try to get you that information.
Yeah, a couple clarifying dates, Tim. As it says here, to kind of keep an eye, you may have already seen those absentee applications land in your mailbox at this point. Those actual ballots will be available for those folks that have, registered to vote absentee as soon as March 20th. So those dates are coming up pretty fast in terms of, when people will start to have the ability to vote absentee.
All right. This is that time that we wanted to build into tonight's presentation to certainly allow you to ask questions. And while it's been great that you've asked them along the way, because it's something that arrived at the moment that you're thinking about it, we also want to have that time where if you're comfortable unmuting yourself and asking a question, or you can type it into chat, and we can make sure that it gets asked so that we address those questions that you may have. Anybody?
Tim, there was a question in the chat about, whether or not the district will be encouraging high school students who are 18 or will become 18 to register to vote before May 4th. I guess in general, does the district have any, are there sort of is there a normal, lesson related material from a civic standpoint that, the district typically puts into place for those types of things?
Yeah. So I was a social studies teacher a long time ago. Certainly our government teacher has, as part of their regular curriculum, how to register, how to become a registered voter. And they also should know that, as a good government teacher, that they can't tell them how to vote. So that would be part of the process. I do know that the high school was looking at sort of an education piece where they wanted to start to help educate some of the students on what that bond might be doing for our facilities, for our high school, for our middle school, for future learners, because some of the questions were coming up. So.
Hey, Tim, it's Richard. Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
In looking at the data, can you confirm that the old bond goes away roughly in the spring, which is 1.3 and change, or 1.32? And with the new bond net post spring, we're talking about 2 additional millage points. Is that correct? Roughly, give or take a decimal point here or there.
Yes, that is correct. So I think the last payment is in June. It might be a little bit later than June, but I believe that last $13,100 payment is made in June, which the key there is we are going to devote on May 4th prior to the expiration of that last payment or the maturity of that bond payment, and therefore technically need to have that 1.32 ask on the ballot as a renewal. And then yes, the renewal is for that roughly 2 mils as you suggest.
Thank
Anything
you.
I missed on that, Jeff? I know Jeff is far more into the weeds on this stuff than I am.
No, I think you captured it, Tim. It's really sort of a timing situation with obviously the old debt expiring and the ability to to layer on this new proposal and in a way that tries to minimize the impact on taxpayers.
Any other questions? You don't have to make them easy. That's what we're here for. We certainly want to engage you in this process. We certainly want to make sure that you've asked your questions.
Well, I think some of the people in the chat room have made some very valid points that we haven't brought up, that the key to our success as a community really lies on our children and how well they're educated in the facilities they have. Some will leave, some will stay, a lot will stay, and they deserve world, I don't want to say world class, because I think as I look at the numbers, you're not building the Taj Mahal. You are fairly conservative in your build costs, and for us as a community, without to create and continue a thriving community, we need the next generations moving through our school system and being educated in the best possible facilities. So, I mean, I strongly support this, Tim, as a resident of Shelby, and as, the Shelby Township supervisor, as well as the chief operating officer at Peterson Farms. Our investment in education needs to be project number one. So a lot of thought went into the plan. So I appreciate the presentation tonight. Thank you.
And thank you for those comments. Yes, you're absolutely right. Having been in the business for 23 years and the benefit of being in 4 different communities, it is the investment that a school district does make in its students shows what that community values, and it's true. And I really think that we are very reasonable in our ask in what we're looking for. I said it a couple different times. It's not that Cadillac ask, it is that Chevrolet ask, and we really want to be conscious of that. We do. And again, it's time for us to do this.
Tim, there is a question in the chat. What is the current enrollment of each of the grades in Shelby schools?
I can answer that. I can answer that in a very ballpark way. We are roughly a 1,200 student district. So the very easy way that works to answer that question is about 100 students per grade. Any other questions? Well, if there are not any other questions, I really, again, want to thank you for taking your time to come out tonight to attend this first community forum. If you do have any questions that you didn't want to ask tonight or forget and think of later, or you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and you're like, but I should have asked this. There's a very easy way to get a hold of me. You can just email me. I'll be happy to get an answer to your question. If you want to set up a sit-down meeting or a phone call, I'd be happy to do that as well. I certainly want to make sure that anybody that has questions or wants to share those comments has that opportunity to do that. So I make myself available to you. Again,
Tim, there is one more question that popped up. What townships will vote in the bond election?
Boy, am I going to get is the last question the one that I'm not totally sure how to answer? I think, Sharon, would you know that? I mean, you're the reporter should know, right? I think every
I'm the one that asked that, Tim.
Sharon asked the question.
I know. I think every township. I do. I think so.
Hi, this is Ivanka Clark. I think it's Shelby, Ferry, Benona, and Nuera.
And is that, thanks, Ivanka. I appreciate that. Is that excluding any, is that excluding Claybank?
And Claybanks. Yeah, Benona, Claybanks, yeah.
Okay, so that's the whole sort I believe. Okay. Okay, good. Thank you, Ivanka. Appreciate that. Good. Again, so as I was wrapping up, if there is something you want to ask, please make sure that you do. Thanks for attending. This is going to be recorded and posted on the website. So if you know of somebody that couldn't make it tonight or just wasn't able to fit it into their agenda, send them to the website. This video will be posted. And like I said, in another month on Wednesday, April 21st, we have our next community forum, and fingers crossed we can have that one be in person. So I don't have anything else unless anybody else does. All right. Well, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I'm off to a basketball game where hopefully the Tigers win.